The title of the article is Nestle, How a Corporation Killed 10.9 Million Babies and Put Their CEO in Charge of the World Economic Forum. Like I said, this just happened, and this is kind of big news. So these are statistics that should shock us all. So let's start with the most horrifying truth, that Nestle's aggressive marketing of infant formula in poor countries directly caused 10.9 million infant deaths between 1960 and 2015. Not thousands, millions, with peaks of 212,000 deaths annually in the early 1980s. This wasn't accidental. It wasn't a side effect. It was a business strategy. So the World Economic Forum's newest sociopath, we have, the circle jerk of billionaires pretending to care about the world's problems while creating them. They've appointed the former Nestle CEO as their leader, the same man who declared water is not a public right. The same executive who oversaw a company that has treated the deaths of children as an acceptable market entry cost. Let that sink in. A man who led a company responsible for more deaths than many genocides is now heading the global policy organization. It's like appointing a pyromaniac as the fire chief. So the calculated infanticide for profit. So according to Berkeley's research, when Nestle penetrated markets in countries without clean water infrastructure, infant mortality increased by 27%. That's not a statistical error. That's math death by corporate strategy. So the company sent representatives dressed as nurses into maternity wards across Africa and Asia. These corporate vultures would give new mothers just enough free formula samples for their breast milk to dry up, trapping them in dependency. Once hooked, these mothers mixed formula only with water available, often that had contaminated ingredients and sewage and pathogens, creating a lethal cocktail for their infants. Each tiny coffin represents another successful customer conversion in Nestle's marketing metrics. And then there's the case of water as a weapon. So in Pakistan, Nestle's aggressive water extraction drained the local aquifer, leaving farmers with dust where crops once grew. Meanwhile, tanker trucks emblazoned with the Nestle logo rolled through, settling bottled water, pure life, the same water they had stolen, back to the people who once accessed it freely. So typical capitalism. In Michigan, the company pays a pathetic $200 annually to extract up to 576,000 gallons of water daily, about 0.000001 cent per gallon, while Flint residents drank lead. In California, they continued pumping millions of gallons from national forests under the permit that expired in 1988. This isn't business. It's hydrological warfare against the poor. Let's not forget about the chocolate built on child slavery. So not content with killing babies and stealing water, Nestle perfected the art of profiteering from literal child slavery. Their cocoa supply chain in West Africa employs children as young as 5, working about 12 hours a day with machetes, exposed to agricultural chemicals, and routinely beaten. A lawsuit in 2021 filed by the former child slaves detailed conditions that would make a Victorian workhouse look humane. Children trafficked from Mali were forced to work until their hands bled, locked in sheds at night to prevent escape, and fed just enough to keep them alive for labor. Nestle's response? Not denying these horrors exist, but arguing they bear no legal responsibility since they don't directly own the farms. They know exactly where their chocolate comes from, tiny enslaved hands, and they don't give a fuck as long as the Kit Kats keep selling. So then we move on to the Chinese melamine murder spree. So in 2008, when Chinese suppliers they adulterated the milk with melamine, yes, the stuff used to make plastics, to artificially boost protein measurements Hundreds of thousands of infants suffered kidney damage. So, at least 6 confirmed deaths. Initially, Nestle denied using these suppliers until investigations proved otherwise. While other companies immediately recalled these products, Nestle delayed and quibbled and deflected. While melamine was subsequently found in their products across Asia, they blamed Chinese regulators rather than their own quality control failures. Each scandal follows the same playbook: deny, minimize, continue operations. Human lives are just another line item in the quarterly report. Collateral damage, if you will. So then we move on to environmental devastation as a corporate strategy. Now, Nestle ranks among one of the world's worst plastic polluters, and it produces about 1.7 million tons of plastic packaging annually. Their bottled water empire generates billions of single-use bottles, most ending up in oceans, rivers, and landfills. In the Philippines, Nestle plastic forms literal garbage island in the coastal communities. In Indonesia, it chokes a once pristine beaches all around the country. Their promised solutions? Vague commitments about recyclability and some distant future date with no intention of actually building a recycling infrastructure in the country. Meanwhile, their palm oil sourcing continues decimating orangutan habits across Indonesia and Malaysia. Critical rainforest disappears at a rate of 1 football field every hour, with Nestle suppliers among the most aggressive destroyers. Each Nestle product contains fragments of orangutan habitat, indigenous displacement, and carbon release. And then we move on to, of course, their 2-tiered safety standards. So Nestle maintains entirely different product lines depending on whether consumers have sufficient political power to demand safety or not. So in Europe, where regulators are strict, Nestle products are proudly advertise their GMO-free status. In America and developing nations, identical products contain genetically modified ingredients with no disclosure. The same pattern appears with artificial colors, high fructose corn syrup, and of course the preservatives that are banned in the EU but pumped into American and developing world versions of the same products. The message is clear. Some lives matter, and others are acceptable as collateral damage, if the price is right. So what are the mathematics of mass murder? So if we assign even a conservative value to human life, let's say 5 million per person, the debt that Nestle owes humanity for 10.9 million infant deaths would exceed 54 trillion. Now, this calculation doesn't include the millions who suffered permanent developmental impairment from malnutrition or waterborne illnesses. It doesn't even count environmental destruction or community displacement or cultural disruption. So Nestle executives classified these deaths as simply marketing adjustment costs during the expansion into new territories, which is a euphemism that's so grotesque that it defies ordinary moral comprehension. Their legal department calculated a potential liability in various jurisdictions, determining that formula profits far outweighed any possible legal consequences, particularly given the limited resources of these potential plaintiffs in target markets. And when it comes down to it, corporate accountability is a fucking fantasy. If an individual caused even one preventable death for personal gain, we'd call them a murderer. But you multiply this by millions and add a corporate charter and stock options, and suddenly it becomes an aggressive market expansion strategy. Now, the elevation of Nestle's former CEO to the lead of the World Economic Forum reveals what the global elite truly value, which is profit over people, commerce over conscience, economic growth over human life. And the 10.9 million dead infants have no voice in Davos, nor do the communities whose water continues to be stolen and depleted worldwide. And the sad part is, and our bitterness comes about the truth about our complicity. And each purchase of Nestle products, from the innocent Kit Kat bar to the seemingly benign bottle of San Pellegrino, it represents our participation in the system. We accept convenience at the cost of distant suffering. So when we consider Nestle's global impact, 10.9 million infant deaths, enslaved children harvesting cocoa, depleted aquifers, choked oceans with plastic, deforested habitats, and impoverished farmers, we confront not the isolated incidents, but a coherent business philosophy that is treating the destruction as an acceptable cost of doing business. So 10.9 million and counting. The question isn't whether we can afford to restructure the system, but whether we can afford not to. And this isn't just corporate malfeasance. This is mass murderer by spreadsheet. This is what Frederick Ingalls called social murder. It's a genocide by quarterly earnings and report. And the man who presided over it gets to lead the global economic conversations while the bodies of infants are buried and forgotten. If there's any justice in this world, Nestle executives would be in prison cells, not corner offices. Their assets would fund clean water infrastructure in communities that they've devastated. And the former CEO would be answering for crimes against humanity, not setting global economic policy. But there's no justice in this world, only profits. And the calculus of global capitalism, 10.9 million dead babies, are simply an externality, a rounding error. It was a price worth paying for shareholder value. That is the system we've built. That is the monster we continue to feed. That is the evil we must name, confront, and dismantle, whether by boycott, by protest, legislative action, or other.